Producers, ask yourself the same question. Why is Barry Beats the best in this profession? Is it because you're scared to step to him, yo? Or because he's a wizard in the studio? It's beat science, you producers have butterfingers. Watch the video, see him make another banger. Watch him trailblaze, never to stay away. Beat your love like he loves steam railways. Producers hate him, he's so defiant. So please show these people out here your beat science. Science.
Hey, how you doing? It's Barry Beats and I'm back. I know I've been missing in action for a while, but a good reason, because I've been working on an instrumental album just for you guys. It's all instrumental hip-hop. It's called The Two Sides of Barry. And, well, what are the two sides of Barry, I hear you ask? Well, there's a bit of a concept behind the album, because the A side of the album is all strictly sampled stuff, the sort of beats I'm more associated with. But the B side is completely sample free, not a sample in sight. So how do you manage to make a sample free album? Have you gone down the trap route, Barry? No, of course I haven't. What I've been doing is I've been experimenting for the last year or so with trying to recreate the sound of the old samples that we all love and that we all sample. The 60s, 70s sound, the funk, soul, jazz, soundtrack library kind of music. But I've been trying to make it in the computer, completely in the computer, devoid of any live instrumentation. I've been trying to basically fake the funk. I know Main Source once said you couldn't fake the funk. Well, I beg to differ. I think nowadays, with the power available in the DAWs, with all the great multi-sampled instruments and all the fantastic processing, it is possible with a good ear to actually recreate those kind of recordings. So that's what I'm going to be looking at in the next 3 videos. So, well, without further ado, shall we have a listen to a few examples that I've been working on? The first one is a cover version I did, actually just experimenting. I did a cover version of a funk classic. It's Maceo and the Max, that's Maceo Parker, and his composition Cross the Tracks. Now, I looked hard and low. I couldn't find another cover version of it, so I thought I'll have a go myself. That's what I did. Have a listen, see what you think. There you go. So that was one of my first dabblings. I've tried to make it sound like a 70s recording, but well, on this next track I'm going to give you a little snippet of, I've gone for an even earlier sound, like an old raw late 60s psych rocky kind of sound. Again, it was a cover version, and this is a track I've always loved. It's a really rare British psych rock track called The Love Maker by Callum Bryce. You can check the original, I'll put a link in the descriptions there, but this is my version. See what you think. go. A couple of examples of the sort of thing I've been doing. Obviously the scope is huge for this. You can sort of remake anything more or less. So let's have a look at how I've approached and done these tracks. I mean, I haven't really got a name for them. I've kind of been calling them fake breaks, but that sounds a bit sort of disparaging, I suppose. But if you've got a good name for what I'm trying to do, stick them down there in the comments, and we'll see if we can agree on a good term for what I'm trying to do, which is sort of creating old breaks. But for now, I'm going to call them fake breaks. Now, the main thing is, you don't have to be a trained musician or musicologist to do this stuff. I'm not. All I've got is a good ear, and that is the number one key. You've got to really analyze all those old breaks and know the kind of sound of those records and what you're trying to get to. So if you know that and you sort of study the instruments that are being played, then there's no reason why anyone can't have a crack at this. And also, I suppose you've got to have good timing, but it all comes down to having a good ear. So they're not really complex chords so much here. It's just getting things sounding funky, groovy. And all that requires is a few techniques and a good ear to know when it does sound funky and groovy. So let's talk about the tools that we're going to need to get started with this. Now, obviously I'm talking about virtual instruments, and probably the first thing you're going to have to invest in, if you haven't got it already, it's vital in a sense because it's the sample engine that most virtual instruments, not all, but most run on, and that is Contact by Native Instruments. So if you can get the full Contact, that comes actually with a pretty good array of all your basic sounds anyway, so you've got a nice library of sounds that come with Contact, but it just means that all the ones you can download will run on Contact. And also there's loads of great free ones out there. I've had some amazing free instruments that people have made and companies have put out for free, so it needn't be too expensive to get started with this. So get Contact. Then the next thing is to sort of assemble your dream band in the computer. In other words, get all the instruments that you're going to need to start building these tracks and get them in the computer. Get a nice library, Contact library built. The main things you want, obviously, you need drums, you need bass, you need guitar, you need loads of keyboard instruments, synths, and then you need horn sections, string sections, orchestras. I mean, the list is endless, but they're all out there to be grabbed. So that's what I've basically been doing, is just building and searching out all the best, most realistic instruments. I haven't got time on the video to go through all of them, but in the descriptions below I'm going to write a little thing about the ones that I rate and that I would recommend, so you can check that out and yeah, start looking into this. The second thing is the playing. So you can have all the greatest instruments in the world, but if the music you're playing isn't the best, then you're not going to get the best out of the instruments. Now you're trying to obviously replicate live musicians, and it's the actual style of playing. I mean, you've got to play in a loose style that's conducive to the kind of way musicians played back in the day. So that's just something that comes from practice and analysing. Again, I just always have to come back to using your ear, listening to these old records and trying to recreate them. And you know, you can start by trying to recreate quite basic tracks. You know, some of the breaks that we all love are pretty basic, so you know, start basically, and all this stuff you just build up gradually anyway, and in my case very slowly, because as I said before, I'm not a trained musician. I have no grades under my belt. I just play a bar at a time, a little bit at a time on loop until it's sounding nice, and that's all it is. It does take a while, don't get me wrong. It's going to be quicker to get a group of musicians in and recording them, but well, I don't have a band of musicians, so I'm stuck with making fake breaks. The third thing to consider is then, once you've played the tracks with the right instruments and got the right groove going, it's how to mix it. Now again, obviously we all know that DAWs are very powerful when it comes to processing. So the sort of plugins that are essential for doing these kind of fake breaks, I mean, the main one I suppose is tape saturation, because everything was recorded on tape back then, and there's some great tape saturators out there. Then there's bit reduction, that works well, especially on drums, and you've got amp simulators, again that can degrade the sound, reverbs, and delays. Reverb wise, probably talking spring reverbs and plate reverbs. They're always really great. There's other things out there. There's like vinyl emulators that actually emulate the sound of a record. There's the Abbey Road one, which is terrific. Obviously the classics, EQ and compression. So EQing, maybe making things slightly less bright, and full frequency is a good trick. And compression, compressing things can often tie things together as well as making them sound punchy and exciting. But there's so many effects out there. Just experiment. I mean, I would say the main thing with processing these kind of tracks, these fake breaks, is just don't be too subtle. You know, you can be pretty sort of brash with your processing, because we're not after polished sounding recordings here. We're not trying to make things sound full frequency and beautiful. We just want them to sound old and authentic. So yeah, that's sort of the main three principles: the instruments, the playing of the instruments, and the processing. But I would say if there's one thing that really gets you off to a good start, and without getting this bit right, you're going to be flogging a dead horse, you're going to be struggling, is obviously drums. The thing all us hip-hoppers love. It's all about the drums. And with this kind of thing, that's going to be your foundation. And you know what they say about building things on dodgy foundations? It's never going to work. So that's what we're going to look at in the next video, where I will be focusing on getting old sounding drums. In other words, making your own drum breaks up. So if you want to see how I do that, then I suggest you stay tuned. Maybe go down, make a cup of tea, have a biscuit, and pop back, and we will look at part 2 of this series, where I'm going to be making my very own drum breaks. Cheers.
Educate the masses on this beat science.
Barry's School of Beats.
Watch Barry's Beats when he's up in the lab.
Give a little like and a thumbs up.
Barry's Beats will have your arms swinging.
And if you could just press the old subscribe button.
See you on the next episode of Barry Science.